When I was a little kid, I was terrified of sharks. I didn't live near the sea, but it always seemed to me that sharks could show up in a river or even in a lake. What difference does it make if it's still full of water? It's a shame no one explained to me back then that sharks explode when they're in fresh water. Of course, it doesn't happen all the time. There are species that can live in rivers. But most sharks simply have to retain a certain amount of salt in their bodies. Take at least the great white shark, the most fearsome marine predator. If it suddenly decided to swim from the sea up the river, the higher salinity level of the shark's body compared to the surroundings would result in bloating. Though gradually fresh water would flow through the gills, the shark would start losing salt. It's quite possible that this would cause it to expand until it exploded. Sounds kind of weird. To see how it works, you need to understand what happens to the body cells in the salt water. The process that keeps the concentration of salt in fish cells at a comfortable level is called osmosis. Essentially, water goes into the cells and back. Freshwater fish, such as goldfish, are saltier than their surroundings. Osmosis causes the surrounding water to enter their bodies through their gills and skin. Saltwater fish, like tuna, are less salty than the water around them. Therefore, in this case, osmosis forces the water out of their bodies. If saltwater fish end up in freshwater, the process is reversed. That is, the fish will absorb liquid. Their unprepared cells swell and bloat, possibly rupturing. And although the shark's body isn't like the body of tuna, it generally works the same way. Even fish that can swim freely between fresh and salt water still need time to get used to changing surroundings. Similarly, humans need to wait to adjust to lower oxygen levels at higher altitudes. We can't say for sure how long a great white shark can survive in freshwater because no one has done such experiments. Well, if they did, the scientific community never heard of them. But aquarium experts say that some saltwater fish can stay in freshwater from 30 seconds to 10 minutes. Longer exposure will kill them, and I don't think the shark will last much longer. Unless, of course, it's a bull shark. Bull sharks don't care about the salinity of the water. They have special physiological adaptations that allow them to live in freshwater. Not something to be excited about. Actually, because bull sharks are known to be aggressive and seem to be responsible for most coastal shark attacks. This species has been seen 2,500 miles up the Amazon River in South America. Bull sharks also live in the freshwater Lake Nicaragua. That's because their kidneys recycle the salt inside the body, and special glands located near the tail also help retain salt. But why would bull sharks need such an ability at all? Other fish somehow survive without it. Well, this adaptation could appear to ensure the safety of the offspring. Due to their resistance to freshwater, young bull sharks can stay where other sharks will definitely not eat them. And yet, there's a price for everything nature gives. To get some unique skill, you need to give up something else. The question is, what exactly have bull sharks given up? If they really felt equally well in both fresh and salt water, they would be the dominant species in coastal waters. But we don't see this happening, which means that something is stopping them. But let's leave the bull sharks alone for now, because the fact that sharks could swell seemed way more exciting to me. Turned out, swelling is not necessarily a life-threatening condition. There is a shark species that swells on purpose. That is, it's a conscious action, not the result of the shark swimming in the wrong area. The swell shark hasn't been thoroughly studied, but scientists know that it can swell twice its size as a defense mechanism. They also know that this pink specimen is an albino, which is why it looks so weird. However, regardless of the pigments, when this shark feels threatened, it bends its body into a horseshoe shape, grabs its tail fin with its mouth, and sucks water into its stomach. Naturally, because of the water, the body immediately swells, and it becomes much more difficult for predators to bite or swallow such prey. If you don't get what the problem is, try biting a balloon. It's really hard. Oxygen also enters the stomach along with water, which is why the shark can't sink back down. Only after releasing everything it swallowed, the shark returns to normal life, while making a sound similar to a dog's barking. So if someone suddenly barks at you from the sea, don't be surprised, it's just a deflating shark. Unlike other saltwater fish, whales can survive in freshwater for some time, about a couple weeks, much longer than all the other sea creatures. However, you shouldn't expect to see whales in the rivers near your home. First of all, because freshwater is a stressful environment for them. This is not their usual habitat where, moreover, there is no food whales are used to. The salty ocean is large and allows whales to dive deep where they can find ample food sources. What are they supposed to eat in freshwater? But the ocean is not only a source of food. The water there has special properties. The researchers noted that the usually smooth and shiny skin of whales became irregular in freshwater. And the longer the whale stays in the unusual environment, the worse things get. Skin infections, then ulcers. Why is this happening? The reason is quite simple. Ocean water contains salts and minerals that help get rid of these infections and heal cuts and wounds. The whale has to deal with quite a lot of injuries. Even such giants suffer from attacks by sharks and orcas. There's even evidence that wounds inflicted by ship propellers in freshwater healed much more slowly than expected. The same goes for dolphins. Researchers have records saying that bottlenose dolphins living in fresher water, such as Florida's Indian River Lagoon, are more likely to develop skin diseases. But the most unexpected effect the sea salt has is on the hearing of whales. Whales use sonar systems that bounce high-frequency sound waves from objects in the water. Well, you know how it works. Sound waves are reflected back to the whale if they hit something big enough, and the whale knows where that object is. The salt in the water helps the whales hear more clearly, which means that in freshwater, they don't navigate in space that well. Though whales are really lucky they can deal with fresh water. In any case, they're luckier than some jellyfish. Well, it's hard to expect impressive tenacity from a creature that looks like jelly. Jellyfish are 95% water, and their cells contain the same amount of various solutes as the seawater around them. Remember how osmosis works for creatures living in salt water? Once in fresh water, they swell and rupture. In the case of jellyfish, you can see this quite clearly. However, even for more complex living organisms accustomed to salt water, fresh water can cause grave, sometimes irreparable damage. Steve found some pretty shocking examples. In 2012, a huge leatherback turtle swam into the Shubenacadie River in Nova Scotia. It was spotted about 12 miles up the river, very far from salt water. The locals tried to help the poor animal by pouring water on it to avoid dehydration, but this water didn't contain enough salt and other substances necessary to sustain life. Eventually, the turtle died. Another similar story happened in France. For unknown reasons, a sick orca swam into the Seine River and couldn't find a way back. People followed the animal for several weeks, tried to guide it towards the sea using drones that reproduced the sounds of orcas, but this didn't work. Ultimately, the orca got so weak from staying in fresh water, it could no longer fight the infection, and also died. Overall, the chances of you encountering some kind of dangerous marine creature in the nearest river are quite small. And if you do, it'll ignore you since it has way more pressing issues to deal with. But I'm not the only one who finds the very idea of the possible encounter scary. For example, there's a legend about a freshwater octopus living in the lakes of Oklahoma. There are occasional reports that look like urban horror stories. An allegedly unknown animal called the Oklahoma octopus grabs swimmers with its tentacles and drags them down to the bottom. Perhaps because it's a vile creature. Or maybe it's hungry. Sounds creepy? You bet it does. It's almost like the Kraken, only in harmless freshwater lakes. But what the hell is an octopus even doing so far away from the sea? You can't help but thinking about a rare ancient animal still living in the lake since the times when they used to be a shallow sea. Over tens of millions of years, this creature had enough time to learn how to adapt to freshwater. Though it's much more likely that this is just another horror story like those about Chupacabra or the Loch Ness Monster. First, in order to fully adapt to life in freshwater, an animal must change its physiology completely, or rather, fundamentally. Not a single octopus, even the most ancient, can do something like this. And second, these are artificial lakes created by people in the 20th century. So even if the ancient octopuses wanted to, they couldn't have survived and evolved in these lakes over tens of millions of years. The lake simply didn't exist back then. Actually, freshwater is not something an octopus can endure. It won't be able to breathe there and will die much faster than it tries to adapt. And yet, sometimes animals migrate to freshwater even when they aren't adapted to it. This is a real paradox. Increasingly, more dolphins are moving into rivers and channels, places where these marine animals can't survive. Scientists have no idea why this is happening, which certainly makes them worried. After all, dolphins can survive outside of salt water only for a short time. Like I already said before, it starts affecting their skin after a while. First comes irritation, then peeling, which bacteria and fungi use to their advantage. Then comes some nasty infection, which causes the death of the animal. But dolphins are very smart creatures that just have to know that fresh water is destructive for them. So why are they deliberately swimming there to meet their doom? So far, scientists have no answer. By the way, don't think that only marine creatures feel sick in fresh water. Freshwater animals also die in salt water. And this happens due to dehydration. Yeah, from dehydration in the water. To survive, saltwater fish constantly drink a lot of water. Yeah, it's salty, so they have to adapt. They filter excess salt from the bloodstream through the gills and kidneys when they urinate. Freshwater fish have never had these problems, so they don't need to drink. So they just don't know how to do it. Water constantly penetrates their bodies through their gills, skin, or mouth when they eat, but when the water around is salt, freshwater fish just can't handle it. The result is pretty obvious, albeit a bit ridiculous. They die of dehydration when they're literally surrounded by water. See you later.